We're ready to get rolling on night one of the 2002 senior project presentations. Please note in your calendars that we will be here at the same time, same place tomorrow. So tonight you'll get half the class and tomorrow the other half. We're so excited that you're here. We're so excited to those people that are home watching the live stream. Before we get started, I have to use that? Before we get started, I would ask everyone to please take out your phones. Seniors, if you can get yours out of your backpacks or your lockers, and please put your phones, that's a joke, please put the phones on airplane mode. This is going to help us keep the signal nice and strong for the tens of thousands of people watching here in the United States and all over the globe tonight. So please put your phones on airplane mode. Thank you. Last year, we did this over in the Down East room because we weren't allowed to have lots of people on campus. Each of the seniors was able to bring one or two. Most people watched it from a live stream. So it's so wonderful to be able to have more people here tonight, and when the word gets out, even more people here tomorrow night, and still have the opportunity for people to watch it at home. We feel really great about the Waldorf curriculum, particularly this Waldorf high school curriculum. It's a really meaningful, robust curriculum, but it cannot be all things to all students, and that's the whole reason for these senior projects, this capstone moment, this opportunity for each individual senior to say, I have this passion, or I have this thing I've always wanted to explore but never had the time to do it, or I wonder what it would be like to. And then they get to fully explore this on their own time with a subject mentor out in the world who really knows the ins and outs of this subject, and an in-house mentor who can just help keep them on track. And it's such a great thing for the teachers and for the classmates and for the community to see this sort of individual expression of each one of these students. So again, I want to welcome you, give you a little bit of a picture of how this is going to work tonight. I think we have 7 students going tonight. Each student will get 10 minutes to share their presentation. In the very back of the room, there's a very sophisticated color-coded system that will let students know when they're nearing the end of their time and when they need to stop. And then we'll give over 5 minutes for questions. And you can ask all the hardest questions you can possibly imagine to these students. They are ready for your questions. We won't be coming up again in between each one. We're going to have students introduce the next student. They've all been told about this. And so all I really want to do is, once again, thank you all for coming out, wish all of the seniors, those speaking tonight and tomorrow, all the best, and let's get rolling with the senior project presentations. I guess I get to introduce one. I would like to bring up Nora Goldberg-Courtney to get these proceedings off and running.
Okay. Oh, jeez. Hi, everyone. I'm Nora, and the title of my project is Making Vegetarian Recipes for Athletes. So I just have a little agenda of things I'm going to go over. So I'm going to talk about my goal of my project, why I chose it, and my process. Then I'll show you some of the recipes I came up with, and then some challenges I faced. There were quite a few. So, okay. So why did I choose this project? First up, I'm vegetarian. Well, I was when I chose the project. I'm not anymore, but yeah. So that was my original idea. And then another is that I run a lot, so I eat a lot. But when I came up with the idea for the project, I was eating a lot of peanut butter and mostly peanut butter to get protein. So I wanted to come up with some other ideas to do that. And I think I skipped a slide. Yeah, I did. So my goal was to make recipes to fuel athletes. So during running season, I always struggle to find things that fuel me to get through the day and everything. So that was my main idea. And then I wanted to include accessible ingredients because I have some cookbooks that are written by runners. I have one by Shailene Flanagan and one by Emma Coburn, and they're both Olympic athletes. But a lot of their recipes, they just have really inaccessible ingredients. I'd never heard of a lot of them, and so obviously I can't buy them if I don't know what they are. So I just wanted to come up with some that were just like ingredients you can get anywhere, and they're super accessible. And then that kind of ties into making the recipes taste good. And then kind of the conclusion of my project was uploading all of the recipes to a blog so that everyone can access them. So then we have my process. So first I researched, and I did a lot of that during the summer and the fall, and like just experimenting with what worked for me, like during running and everything. And then during the fall and the winter, I made a lot of my recipes because it's just kind of cozy that time of year, and I like baking then. So then I built a website for the recipes this winter. So there are some of those are all of my recipes. I did 3 breakfast ones. So right here, we've got the oatmeal that I made, and it's got some berries and chocolate and peanut butter. So you got like some protein and carbs and everything. And then we've got a Dutch pancake. And that one, because a big protein source for a lot of people who are vegetarian is eggs, but I really don't like eggs. So there are like 4 eggs in that. So you're getting like a serving of them, but it doesn't taste like it. So that was kind of my goal there. And then we have some blueberry turnovers. Those were a fun one that I did this winter. And then right there, zucchini muffins with some chocolate chips. And then right there is my strawberry shortcake smoothie. That's my favorite by far. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then that one is some peanut butter banana bread. That's pretty good. And then that is French toast that I made. That's my most recent one, I think, that I did a couple weeks ago. That one is some energy bites. That's just, it's just some quick energy if you need it. That one is a protein salad that I made. It's got tofu and quinoa for the protein. Then that one is an apple and onion grilled cheese. It sounds weird. I have to give a shout out to Isla because she kept coming to school with apples in her sandwiches, and I thought it was really weird, and I tried it, and it was really good. So, yeah. And then that one is one of the main ones I'll be talking about, and it's a tofu stir fry, and I really like it. That's probably the one I'm most proud of. Right there is a burrito bowl. I have to shout out to my sister because she came up with it, and then I kind of did my own spin on it. Also, I'll talk about that one in a minute. That's just a burrito. That's some pizza. Shout out to my dad because he makes that a lot, and then I kind of did my own spin on it again. So I took a couple, but like I changed them so that they were mine. And so, so I'm going to talk about the tofu stir fry right now. So that one is basically you have some tofu, and you cut it into little cubes. And I did like them a little bit too small when I did it, so I specified in the recipe that they're supposed to be a little bit bigger. So you just fry those in some olive oil, and then while you're doing that, you put some rice on and just let that cook. And then you also have some red peppers, snap peas, carrots, and onions that you're just frying up with some olive oil in another pan. And then the sauce that I made, this one I don't put like the measurements next to it. But you've got soy sauce, garlic, sesame oil, cornstarch, and red pepper flakes. And the reason that I didn't put measurements is because I feel like it's a pretty individualized thing. Like I made it and there was way too much cornstarch. It was way too thick. I didn't really like it. Like it tasted good, but it looked pretty bad. So I just figured people could figure out how they wanted to do it. So yeah, you mix it all together. You come up with that. And then next up is the lunch burrito bowl that I mentioned. So that one, again, you can do it with rice, and I don't usually, but if you want some extra carbs, you can. So you start cooking the rice, and then you have black beans and red pepper and onion and sweet potato, and you just cook all that in some olive oil and make sure that the sweet potato is soft, because if it's not, it doesn't really taste good. And so then while you're doing that, you mash up an avocado with some lime juice and pepper and salt, and then you mix it all together and you get that. So next up are my chocolate energy bites. These were probably the favorite with my family because they ate a lot of them. So we have chocolate chips and coconut oil. You just melt that on a double boiler, and then add some chopped almonds and frozen blueberries, and then you put all that together, sprinkle some salt on it, and you put it in the fridge for like 30 minutes. And you can add flaxseed if you want some extra protein. It gives it a kind of weird texture, but it does taste pretty good. So that's a picture of those. And then next up is my favorite. It's the strawberry shortcake smoothie. It's got strawberries, and you can do frozen. I do fresh, but if you want it a little thicker, you can do frozen. And yogurt and flaxseed and vanilla. So that's what it looks like. And the flaxseed that's why I named it the strawberry shortcake smoothies, because the flaxseed kind of makes it taste like that. I don't know why, but it does. So some challenges that I went through was experimentation going wrong. Like I said, with the tofu stir fry, the sauce is way too thick, and it tasted good, but it was definitely something I didn't really do that well. So I changed it a little bit, and yeah, it's a learning experience. So then it's also limited to alternative protein sources. So like I said, I had some eggs and tofu and quinoa and nut butter, and those were like my main sources of protein. And then my knowledge of website design, that was a pretty big one for me because I'd never done it before and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I learned how to do it, and so I have a blog, and I'm gonna show it to you here in a second. Yeah. So this is my blog, and I just want to shout out Hannah real quick. It says with help from Hannah. She was my track coach last year, and we would just talk about our different food and everything that we would eat. And we FaceTimed this winter, and she was my mentor, and I want to thank her a lot. And then these are just my recipes on the blog. And yeah, so I also want to thank Mr. Gurrell for running through everything and meeting with me and helping me with everything. And yeah, thank you. Okay, do I have any questions? Yeah.
Did your dad buy you a food cart yet?
No.
No?
I wish.
For a food cart.
Okay. Yeah.
Other than making sure you're getting some protein, what makes this target athlete? Because you talk about athletes, or what research
Yeah.
did you do to target this athlete other than just tasty food that isn't junk? Fruit and vegetables good, but it's tasty.
Yeah, so I mean, you have protein and you have carbs, and I mean, it is kind of just anyone can eat it. You don't have to be an athlete to eat it, but it's just what helps me when I'm when it's a sports season. It's what I like to eat. So I don't know. It's the protein and the carbs, and then like stuff like the energy bites are just like quick sugar if you need that. But yeah, you don't have to be an athlete to eat it. It's
Did you specifically do research for that, or it was just?
Yeah, I definitely did. Like I said, I got some cookbooks by athletes just to see what they did. And they have like before they have the recipes, they have like what they eat on certain workouts. So I would look at that too. So, yeah, cool. Yeah.
How come you no longer vegetarian?
It's a good question.
Did it not fuel you enough, or were there not enough options, or did you grow tired of it?
A little bit of all of that. I really like bacon and pepperoni. So it was a little hard. But yeah, that's the main reason. So, yeah. Okay, do I have anyone else? Yeah. You mean taste or looks?
You already said the looks was something you said that.
The sauce. Yeah, that was pretty nasty.
Do you spit anything out?
No, but with the muffins that I made, I didn't really talk about those a lot, but I did some experimenting with like butter versus olive oil. When I did butter, they had a very weird texture, so I didn't use that. But I never spit anything out though. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you guys. Okay, so next up we've got John Miles.
Alrighty, hello everyone. My name's John Miles, and for my senior project titled Building a Better Self, I served as a personal trainer for 2 of my peers over the course of 5 months, and this entailed working out with them 5 days a week for about 5 months, writing workout plans for them, and recording data all along. So I'll get into the first slide. So why did I choose this for my senior project? So I've been training with weights for about 3 years now, and as I reflected on my journey, one of my least favorite parts and the scenarios where I had the most struggles were in the beginning, because there's not a lot of great sources, viable sources when it comes to, how to train, what to train, and stuff like that. There's a lot of fake information on YouTube. In the beginning, I caught myself following these tutorials that said like you could gain 10 pounds in 2 weeks if you just did such and such an exercise. And spoiler alert, it never works. So my goal for this was to provide that experience to some people instead. So the process of this. So in order to have a project like this, I needed to have some subjects. So after presenting this idea to my class, I had 2 people come up to me, and I'm going to refer to them as subject 1 and 2 for confidentiality purposes. So the first step after I gathered my 2 subjects was to find their goals. And so subject 1's goals were to gain strength and lose weight, and subject 2's goals were to gain weight and gain strength. So I had both sides of the spectrum, which was great. And then I had to find a mentor to help me craft this plan and work out with these guys as safely as possible. And I found him at my local gym, and his name's Chad Buzzle. He had a great background in physical therapy, personal training, everything I could have asked for in a personal trainer. And so for the first 2 weeks before I started with these guys, I sat down with him and I crafted a workout plan. And so we kind of pooled both of our ideas together and crafted this perfect workout plan that these 2 guys were going to follow. And so once I had crafted the perfect workout plan, I had to start the process of actually training these guys. And so to start off, I did a 2-week period where we only trained with lightweight and for form, because it's never a good idea to jump into something like this. You can get injured. So for those first 2 weeks before we got into the plan, we just trained light and just kind of gained a general knowledge of what exercises did what, how to just general gym etiquette and stuff like that. So it was good. And then after we had gone through that beginning stage, we started off with actually working out. And the original plan was I was just going to hand them the the script that I had just written out for them to follow. And then they were going to work out on their own, and I'd check in with them bi-weekly and work out with them. And as soon as I did that, they stopped going to the gym. So it was a clear message that I had to work out with them. And in the end, it actually was for the better, because it provided motivation for me to go to the gym, because I didn't want to let anyone down. And it was easier for me to closely moderate them and gather data and such and such. So it definitely worked out for the better. I'm glad it worked out like that. So after this first month or so, the guys started to get into the habit, and I caught myself like I didn't really want to go to the gym that day, and they would text me and they'd be like, "John, we gotta go." So that was definitely a good change in a little role reversal, because not only was I now the one encouraging them, but they were encouraging me to go to the gym. So by month 2, they were definitely excited about it, which was really good. So now we get into the results, because like I said, I'd been recording data all throughout. So hopefully this next slide's the results. So this is the bench max. So the 100% is their starting stats, and both lines are the 2 of them. And as you can see, we have I got to use my clicker here. As you can see, we had about an average of about a 40% strength increase over 4 months, which is really great. I was super excited about that. And then I have another data point on 8 rep curl maxes. So this one was even more impressive. We had about a 75% strength increase from the beginning statistics, which was really, really impressive considering that we only had 4 months. Because this is a very slow process. These type of things don't happen fast. Here's a copy of the workout plan that I had for these guys. I can get copies for anyone who's interested after, and I'd be more than happy to go to the gym with them and give them a little walkthrough of it. I'll just briefly touch on it. I have the splits for what day, what exercises and what muscle groups you're working on each day, the exercises you'll be doing to do that, how many reps for each exercise, and then things to focus on at the bottom, because not all of this process happens at the gym. A lot of it is out of the gym when you're eating, sleeping, all kinds of good stuff. And then, like I said at the beginning, their goals were strength gains and then weight changes as well. So subject 1 lost 30 pounds over this 4 months, which is really, really great. And then subject 2 gained 14 pounds. So they both made progress in their respective categories, which I was really excited about. And then what did I learn over the course of this process? So I already had a pretty broad general knowledge of this industry of fitness. But what I hadn't had any experience was working out with a bunch of other people and trying to teach them, because it had been a very personal solo mission up until now. So I definitely gained a lot of professional perspective, like how to work with other people that aren't myself, being conscious about their different situations and backgrounds. And then the last thing I learned was just this parallel between dedication and results. So if I actually skip back to the data here, you can see there's a little bit of a plateau right here. And plateaus occur in fitness when you're training. It's a natural thing that happens. But this also happened to be about when we were working on our college apps and going on vacation. So you're not always going to have access to the gym. And the data shows it. So I just thought it was really cool that there was a direct parallel between the amount of work you put in, how consistent you are, and then your result in growth. And I think that can be applied to more than just the gym. Whatever your goals are in life, if you stay dedicated and keep working hard at them, you'll get there. And then I'd also like to thank Mr. Reinhardt and then Chad Buzzle, who's not here, for helping me form this presentation and project. And then I'd also like to thank the 2 subjects, who I will not name, for toughing it out throughout these 5 months and putting in a ton of hard work. So thank you, guys. Got any questions? Mr. Sloan?
There was some talking about a perfect workout plan.
Yeah.
Would you have to adapt a perfect workout plan depending on a person's body type or physical limitations or age?
Yes, 100%. Workout plans don't fit all categories. I worked with Chad Buzzle to create one. I told them about each of their specific goals, and so I found one that had like a balance that would help both of them achieve their goals. But definitely, like this workout plan wouldn't work best if you're older or if you're just starting and you're younger. It's definitely specifically for these 2 guys, or I tried to be as specific as possible. Faith.
Do you see yourself doing this like professionally or like maybe?
Probably not, but I definitely I like the medical field, something along the lines of physical therapy. So that's similar. That's more like kind of recovery after an injury. But I definitely have a passion for training other people. I don't think it's going to be my career, but I liked working with those guys, definitely. Miss Welch.
You mentioned gym etiquette. That was a new phrase for me.
It's a thing.
And I was wondering if you could expand upon that and also elaborate on how well subject 1 and 2 did.
Right.
adapt into
Well, totally. That's a great question. So in the beginning, subject 1 and 2 definitely were not up to date on the gym etiquette, because you always have to put your weights away. That's number 1. Number 2, well, let me see. Definitely don't make a ton of noise while you're working out. That's definitely not appropriate. It's usually just entire life etiquette, but I called it gym etiquette. So just be respectful and stuff like that. Hit it.
You might not have an answer.
That's okay.
But it seems so. Subject 1 and 2.
Mm.
They seem to start in a similar place and end in a similar place.
Right.
So definitely took a really different path getting there.
Totally.
Is that based off of different training plans? Do you have an idea of explaining that?
Yeah, so I didn't vary their training plans like crazy. Subject 1 who wanted to lose weight, I had him do some cardio and stuff like that as well. But here, let me backtrack. They started about the same place because I just started with the base percentile of like their starting spot. they started off at different weights and different strengths, obviously. But I would say, no, I don't know why they didn't improve at the same rate, but I think what's important and what's cool is the consistency of the final results, that they really were pretty similar when it comes to percentiles. Susan.
Feel that the rest of their lives were pretty controlled and that not much else changed? Did you say, don't change your diet for these 4 months? Or is ski season, would you factor that in because they're going to sugar bowl? Could you control that or was that?
No, 100%. I can make suggestions, obviously, because like I said, a lot of the gym and a lot of like transformations happen outside putting in the work. It's a lot of like eating and stuff like that, like you mentioned. So yeah, I definitely made recommendations, whether or not if you're trying to gain weight, eat more calories, eat more protein, focus on that type of stuff. And if you're trying to lose weight, I try not to be too restrictive. My main focus, I think I have it in here. Oh, sorry. Was the eating hours when it comes to losing weight. It's actually the best strategy I found was to not eat after 8, because then it's not focusing so much on like what you can and cannot eat, which is also very important. But it keeps it simple because if you don't eat after 8, you have what's called like kind of a bit of a fast because you have this sleeping stage in which you're not eating, hopefully, and then you wake up in the morning and then you eat breakfast. So it allows for a minor fast, which will help you lose weight. Totally. Mr. Shahan. Yoga didn't really go hand in hand with personal fitness. I found I was very tight when I did yoga in Mr. Cheyenne's class. I couldn't do a lot of the stretches, but I tried my best. But yoga could be very helpful in avoiding injuries because if you're not limber, you can stretch something the wrong way, and that can definitely lead to an injury. Miss Welsh. Okay.
Throughout your history at Maine High School,
Yep.
you have worked the lab assistant and just assistant in many projects. Emily.
Yes.
I'm wondering what role Emily played in this project.
Emily didn't play a major role in this project. She was definitely always there, keep me occupied, potentially from going to the gym at times, but I always found a way to fit some time in for these guys. Totally. Alrighty. I'm going to pass it on to Emma Haims. Take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Haims, and I will be presenting my project entitled Youth-Led Justice, A Second Chance Through Restorative Dialogue. And the way I'd like to start my presentation tonight is by acknowledging the origin of this work that I've been doing. So restorative justice is a philosophy that has been developed and practiced by Indigenous communities throughout the world for thousands of years. And it's important to acknowledge this in an attempt to really honor the founders of these practices, as we are increasingly seeing them used in different spaces of today's society. So for my senior project, I have been networking and training since about earlier this summer to ultimately become certified as a restorative justice facilitator. And so I want to start by building some context and background knowledge for you for restorative justice before I get into my process, which will come. So a short disclaimer. So the nonprofit organization that I have been working with this past year used to be called Maine Youth Court, and they've made the transition within the past month or so to their new name, Youth-Led Justice, which is a much more accurate representation of their mission, as it really works to highlight youth agency over the more traditional criminal justice system that they're really trying to get away from. So youth-led justice is what's called a youth-led restorative justice diversion program. And it's for young people between the ages of 11 and 17 who have gotten in trouble with either the law, their community, their school, or any combination of the three. And the program that I have had the honor and pleasure of working with to complete my senior project. So some examples of incidents that could lead youth to a program like Youth-Led Justice within a school setting can include incidents of bullying, vandalism, or the use of hate language. And then common examples within a community can include things like theft, illegal drug use, or assault. So youth who are given the opportunity to complete a program are typically referred by what's called a JCCO, a Juvenile Community Correctional Officer. And not only do programs like Youth-Led Justice work to counteract the school-to-prison pipeline, but they also focus a lot on minimizing the negative effects of having high-level criminal charges on a youth's record. So they're ultimately helping to keep as many youth out of Long Creek Youth Detention Center as possible. So one of the reasons programs like Youth-Led Justice believe so strongly in diversion work is because they believe that a healthy and safer community is a community really capable of helping to support and rehabilitate a human when they're in need of help. So while Youth-Led Justice does have some specific hopes brought forth from referral sources, the main goal is to have all the action items of the restorative plans come from the participants in the restorative process. So teachers, advocates, family members, and then ultimately the youth going through this process should have the most agency and say over what their goals will be. And then the named victims or the most impacted by the incident will be given the space to share what they need in order to heal and move forward. And I think it's really important to share that each case is incredibly adaptable based on the needs of the youth or the family coming to the program. Because each case is so different and so dynamic that adaptability is a really important skill and definitely something that I've had to work on throughout my training. But it really comes down to being able to honor the various lived experiences of the youth coming through this program. And I think that's a huge part of the hidden challenge, and again, just something that I've been working on a lot. So I wanted to share a statistic from 2017 USM School of Public Service, which found that diversion recidivism rate is only 7%. So that means that the success rate of diversion programs like Youth-Led Justice is 93%, which means that's 93% of youth who are not getting in trouble, again with the law for at least 2 years. Compared to things like supervision and community reintegration or discharge, which are all more punitive measures taken after the law has been broken. And they have a much higher percent of recidivism. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the hopes of restorative justice and what the work really looks to accomplish. So this slide was brilliantly created by a Youth-Led Justice staff member, actually, and it looks at what I like to call the 3 C's, which are conversation, connection, and community. And it's sort of believed that through these values on the interior, the exterior phrases and words will be completed, sort of in the wholeness of our community. But the thought is that they'll sort of feed one another. And so to put it simply, restorative justice seeks to educate rather than punish. And in order to really repair harm and rebuild trust when something has happened, facilitated dialogues are held in which the youth respondent works with Youth-Led Justice staff to develop what's called a restorative plan that I've mentioned. And in this plan, the needs of the victim or the one impacted are reviewed and addressed, as are strategies and what we call replacement behaviors are put in place for the respondent's own personal growth. So it's really about accommodating both parties and again, just being able to adapt and meet people where they're at in the moment. So this slide is what's called a social discipline window. And it's a visual representation of basically the unifying hypothesis of restorative practices. I want to point out the axes, which are accountability and support. And it's where high accountability and high support meet in this upper right-hand quadrant that we're always trying to strive for in restorative practices. And so for those of you who are more visual, I just thought that bringing this slide would help. So it's about working with someone rather than the alternatives. So now for my process. My process took on a 4-pronged approach, as I like to call it, and that was observation, training, co-facilitation, and then lead facilitation. So the training really took on many forms. It included more intensive Zoom training sessions with restorative experts and youth-led justice staff, and those were more required for me to complete in order to become eligible to facilitate a restorative case. But I also had my own personal trainer, as I have been calling her, Lee Ashley Pettingill, who is listening into my presentation tonight. And she has been my guide and my mentor the whole way through this process. And I really would not be able to be here saying what I'm saying without her. She works for Youth-Led Justice, and she's a really amazing individual. And so we met not only in person at the headquarters in Portland and for coffee, but we had countless hours on Zoom together, discussing our cases, coming up with plans, really doing it all. And in my capstone case, which was the case that I led, Lee Ashley and I sat down together in one of our prep meetings and were able to write the whole script for that restorative process. And the script is essentially where the restorative questions are posed, as well as the notes are taken for the restorative plan. So it's basically the guide and the outline for the whole process. And I was really proud in that moment because from the start of the summer, where all I really had was the passion and the interest, it had just really marked how far I had come. So I wanted to share that. But the meat of my work with Lee Ashley really talked about how to be in restorative spaces, which may sound oversimplified, but it has to do, again, with having an underlying understanding and skill set that's instilled in you, but then be able to adapt that based on the youth and the family that's going through the program. And so what it really comes down to is being able to meet people where they are at, because it's never going to be the same. One size never fits all in this case. So playing an active part. So what I had in my mind's eye when I thought about what I hoped to accomplish in addition to becoming a restorative facilitator was being able to make some sort of tangible change in a youth's life. And I think it's important for me to share that the youth coming through this program have amazing things going on in their life that aren't necessarily given a spotlight, because in a culture of disposability, there's a lot of focus on the crime and the misbehavior. So oftentimes the skills and the passions and the good things are really sidelined. So what restorative plans often do is they draw on the skills and the interests of a respondent in learning new pathways of accountability. So the bicycle in this case represents the support for a youth who wanted to get involved in an after-school mountain biking club, but didn't have the resources to do so. And so Lee Ashley and I were able to put our heads together, and between my old mountain bike, which he's probably using a lot more than me, and youth-led justice funding, we were able to make that tangible change for that particular youth. And that was really meaningful to me. And so that really marked support. And then accountability really comes into play when they're playing an active part in their restorative circle and their process. And being able to be there, and those processes go for, on average, around 2 hours. So being able to be an active participant in those circles and the ability to own up to their mistakes is already a huge amount of accountability. And so those things do go hand in hand. And it is about the simultaneous journey, ultimately. So wrapping things up, I want to look at how we respond, not only in our intimate communities, but in the broader world. Restorative justice looks at a lot of really interesting polarities, things like scarcity versus abundance, and subtraction versus addition to an environment when harm has happened or something has gone wrong. So what I really want to leave you all with tonight is this idea of reaction versus responding, that polarity. And oftentimes in our culture, unfortunately, when harm has happened, people often look all around them for an immediate fix to that issue, and that really has to do with cutting your losses, doing away with, putting someone away. That's terminology we hear a lot. And what restorative justice is looking to do is be able to say, okay, when harm has happened, we have everything we need right in front of us to repair and rebuild. And with that mindset, what you're doing is you are committing to investing in a community member or a young person who is struggling in an environment that already exists for that person's long-term recovery and success. And so it is the long game, and it's not a quick fix, but it's really important. And if you walk away with anything, that's what I would like you to walk away with, is this idea of response rather than reacting. So I printed some resources, which you can take on your way out if you want more information. I know that was a lot. And thank you all so much for your attention. I want to thank Ms. Welch, who was a huge in-school support in getting me ready. And I would happy to answer any questions at this time. So thank you. Yeah, Melissa. Yeah, so that's a good question. It is very individualized based on the case and the incident, what happened. Typically, it takes multiple weeks for youth-led justice to come up with the time frame and what the schedule is going to look like. And then after the restorative process, the circle happens. Usually, they come up with, it can be anywhere between like 2 and 4 months, where basically they're acting upon their restorative plan and they're having check-ins with the staff members. So it does really depend, but like they call it like accountability partners. So people will check in to see where they are with their process. But it does really depend. It's never quick. But yeah, that was a good question. Yeah, Mr. Barham.
Do you see yourself as continuing in this restorative justice work, maybe in college and beyond? Something that really sounds like the flattering.
Yeah, I definitely do. My parents are both educators, and they were the people who I just heard about it at dinner when I was young, and I thought it was really boring. But then I got older, and I realized that it was actually something I was really interested in. So I could definitely see myself. I'm definitely going to continue volunteering at Youth Led Justice and hopefully leading more restorative conversations. So short answer is yes. Yeah, Mr. Shahan.
Does being youth justice talk at all about the ways in which others in the indigenous practice that overwhelming people who benefit from this practice are white or black kids?
Yeah. Oh my God. Sorry. Yes. There's a lot of acknowledgement that goes on there in terms of the people that are reaping the benefits of these practices, and that's something that I really wanted to highlight by kind of doing the acknowledgement piece at the beginning, because I think that there is a lot of misunderstanding about where the practices come from and how they're used. So they've been doing a lot of screenings of Dawnland, which is a film we saw here at school. And they're doing a lot of things to sort of spread the awareness. And so I guess, yes, I don't know if that answers your question, but they are always trying to work on making sure people know the truth about where they're coming from, and making sure that because it is an appropriated thing, because we are taking that these practices, that we're understanding where they're coming from and working to do right by them. Yeah, Dan.
How do you end up in restorative justice? Is it an alternative sentencing?
Yeah, so it's called a diversion program. So oftentimes it depends on the case, but the JCCO, so when the incidents happen, the JCCO will sort of review the case, and then they basically can decide whether or not they think that youth-led justice would be an appropriate path. So yeah, so they are referred, and that can also be from teachers. It's not only JCCOs who are doing the referrals, but it's basically an alternative pathway that they're trying to get a lot more youth involved in, as opposed to just going down to like the legal court system. Yeah, so they're doing a lot more of it. They're getting like flooded with cases, which is good and bad, I guess. Julie?
Did you run into any roadblocks for time research?
Yes, actually I did. So I wasn't actually able to facilitate for quite a while because there were a number of cases that were that the youth and the family weren't comfortable with having any additional people be in on their process. So as I said before, observation was another big piece of it. So when I was learning to lead one of these conversations, I observed a lot. And a lot of families weren't comfortable with that, which totally makes sense. And so I kind of had to wait a long time before I was able to get in on any of the cases. And so that was hard because I really wanted to start on with that part of my project. But it's not like a cookie cutter thing at all, which made it kind of dynamic and interesting. I kind of had to like wait my turn and do other things in the meantime. I'm getting the red folder, which I think means my time is up. But I would love to talk to anyone afterwards more about it. Trust me, I could talk about it for a while. So I'd love to introduce Lola, who's going to be talking next.
All right. Hi, I'm Lola. And today I'm going to be talking about my quilting conquest. And so this wasn't my original plan for my senior project. My first idea was to upcycle clothing from places like Goodwill or Plato's Closet, and kind of make them trendy, cute, and clean to then give to those in need. But as I was kind of working on that process, I found it really hard to motivate myself to like put in the work and the time that was required. And I just wasn't feeling connected to it. And my mom had the idea that I should take up quilting because my grandmother is an incredible quilter. So it'd be kind of like passing down the talent. So these are my mentors. On the right is my grandmother, and on the left is her friend Rita. And because we can't have family members as our mentors, Rita was mine. They have been best friends since my mom was a kid, and this is a quilt they made together for an auction. And Rita actually teaches people how to quilt, and they both learned how to do it together. So I was very excited to learn from the both of them. So why quilting? So my grandmother had 2 kids, and when my mom left the nest, my grandmother needed something to do to occupy her time, and she took up quilting. And ever since I was little, we have a lake house in my family, and every time I go, on every single bed, couch, chair, and all the cabinets, there's quilts everywhere. And then at my grandparents' house, same thing, covered in quilts. And then in my own household, like for birthdays or Christmas presents, we get quilts. Like, we never had a comforter, it was always a quilt. So it's something that I've always been around, and my grandmother and Rita are both extremely talented. So I was like, you know what, this would be a really cool thing to learn how to do and a new skill. So the first thing I had to do was pick out a design. And since I didn't know how to use a sewing machine, or frankly know anything about sewing in general, I tried to pick out the easiest design possible, because I thought that'd be a great starting place. And I had a book full of the different types of log cabin quilts, and this is the one I chose, and it's called the Apple Crisp. And the book laid out all the directions, the measurements, and the steps to make that quilt. So it wasn't just like, here's a picture, good luck. It was really helpful to like use the book and go over the steps until I kind of had a good understanding and could start. And so the first thing I had to do was cut all the fabric. And so the first thing I had to do was cut 63 of these squares. They were 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. And then with the rest of my excess fabric, I cut 1.5 inch strips. I just kept going and going and going. And then I ironed them all flat. And then once I did that, the next step was understanding how to use the sewing machine. And this sewing machine is my great-grandmother's that my grandmother now uses. So again, it's been passed down. And my grandmother and Rita had me, like, they took out the string and the bobbin and showed me how to do it and then do it by myself. They showed me how to wind a bobbin, and, like, if a thread was to get caught beneath the machine, the steps I would have to do to remove the thread and continue sewing, or, like, if I ran out of thread halfway through a piece of cloth, what to do. And they did a couple of the first seams in my quilt before I did, just so I could kind of see how I was supposed to do it. So the first step, as you saw in the first picture, it's just a lot of squares. So I'd start, like I said, with a 2.5 by 2.5 inch square, and then from there, I would sew together 1.5 inch strips that are 2.5 inches, and I then would, once I sewed them together, I would iron them. And then once I did that, I would add 4.5 inch strips, and then iron them, and then I had the first ring of the square. And then once I did that, I would add 2 more 4.5 inch squares, iron them, and then add 6.5 inches. And the reason why you iron after you do a side is because if you don't, then it's going to be a little wonky because there's going to be excess fabric in the seams. So when you iron it, it'll be like the exact measurements you need. So when you add that next piece on top of it, it'll fit perfectly and it won't take up too much space. And so the last step is to add the 8.5-inch strips, and then you have a completed square. And I had to do this process 63 times, which was very, very tedious. And I kind of got into a rhythm of doing like somewhere between 10 and 20 at a time. So I would just go in a cycle, and I'd put on a documentary and just kind of go with it, so I could get a bunch out in a short amount of time. So this is me working on them. As I said, I did a lot in one sitting. And that little board they're under is kind of the board I used to like design them and make sure they were all aesthetically pleasing. And it also kept me organized. And this is my dog. There was a dog bed in the sewing room. And he happens to be my partner in crime. It's the love of my life, Hendrix. And he was just chilling in there. He didn't really understand what was happening with the sewing machine, the loud noises, but he looks awful cute, so. There we go. So this was what the sewing room looked like once I was in there for a little bit. It was very clean before I arrived, but through trying to design the squares and finding the right pieces, it was very messy. But I think that's, with any form of art, it's going to get messy. And so once I had all 63 squares, I had to sew them in rows of 7. So I would take 7 squares and just sew them together. And then once I did that, I would sew 2 rows together, and then I'd do that until I had 9 rows. And this is kind of what my quilt was starting to look like. And so the next step was to do the inner border, and I chose a very dark brown to kind of add some dimension. And the border was 2.5 inches, and it didn't have to be super neat just because we were going to do yet another border on the outside of that. So the outer border, that's my dog again. He helped, he really did. He was very, very proud of it. I did, like, you can't really see it here, but it's like music notes, and just a really light border to kind of frame it. And so once we did that, that's my grandma's dog, Fanny. She thought the fabric meant, okay, let's play. That's not what it meant, but it's fine. So we got 2 pieces of fleece, and we sewed them together because we wanted it to be super cozy when you lay under it. And so the fleece I thought would be really, really nice. And so we, once we sewed it together, I duct taped it along the floor just so it wouldn't move, made sure there were no wrinkles. And then I took the top of the quilt and I put it on top. And so the next step is to pin in each of the little squares. So like here, 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 and every single one. And this is so that like once I sew the fleece to the border, it won't like shift and move when you're using it, and it'll stay together and stay in place. So we added pins like that in every single square, and we kind of ran out of those pins, so then we had to use like normal pins, and everyone was getting stabbed, but it's part of the process. And so once we did that, we did a step called tacking, which is basically just removing the pins and then tying knots. And there's something in the quilting community that I wasn't aware of, which is called a tacking party. So like when a lot of old ladies are like quilting together, they'll like get together and like put the quilt on the table and just do this together, and it's called a tacking party. So I had one of those. Yeah, I felt like kind of like an initiation. I don't know. I was honored. So we did that, and then I'm not the best sewer, and this was my first time. So were there occasional holes? Yes. So we would just stick a little tack in there, no one would know. But like in some of the seams, like I'm sure there was one there. Oh, definitely one right, hold on, right up here. That looks like a hole to me, where we would just put a couple knots in and then problem solved. And so the final step was, once I had that completely finished, I took the fleece and folded it over and then made a seam connecting that to the light colored border I already had. And instead of using a sewing machine for this step, I hand sewed it, which was very tedious. I want to say it took me somewhere between like 3 and 5 hours. And my grandmother and my mom kind of like experimented with what they thought would look the best, not what I thought, what they thought would look the best, because of course they're always right. And so once they decided on a stitch they liked, I learned it. And once I did that, I was just ready to fall asleep under it because I was like, yay, I'm done. And someone pointed out, they're like, hey, is that another pin? And I was like, I hope not. And it was. I had not finished. And so once I did that, the last thing to do is just to throw it in the dryer with a couple wet towels so it's like super soft. And then you have a quilt. And so I will show you my quilt. Hold on. So that's what I made. Are there any questions? Mr. Shahan.
So at this hacking point,
Yes.
so are there, do you learn any like quilting myths, like if you say somebody's name 5 times while you're quilting, they will marry you or they'll die, or kind of like,
No, but I will say that since I was spending so much time with my grandmother, that I got a lot of the family gossip. So like I was very like up to date with what was happening with my cousins and all the drama, and I just felt like very like adult, like I know what's happening. So that was definitely fun, and it made me feel really like mature, like that I was involved in the drama now too. So yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
When you're ironing the seams, are you pressing them to one side, or are you kind of opening them up and up?
Well, like when I first started, I was trying to like be really organized and stuff like that here. I tried to sew like away from the seam, so it'd be really flat. But like once I did like 30 or so, I was already just done. So as long as it was flat, it was fine by me. So, Nora. That's a great question. I thought about just like keeping it for myself, like it's my first quilt, like as a memory or like a memento. I've thought about giving it as a gift, donating it. I don't know yet. I don't know. Mike.
What are your future plans for quilting? Do you think there could be a career path?
No. I would hope not. I mean, if it comes to it, I did really enjoy this like type of like pattern, and I already want to do it in like a different color. Like I think it'd be cool if I did one with like greens instead of browns. So I definitely see this as a hobby I'd like to take up. I already have my own sewing machine that I've tried to use. Keyword tried. But it was definitely fun, but I really hope it's not my career path. Yeah.
Is there a plan as to how all the different like colors you line them up and organize them, or did you just kind of go and the spur of the moment say, oh, these things look great?
Yeah, my mom, my sister, and I all went to Martin's to try to pick out fabric, and I didn't really have a vision until I got there, and then I like saw some like fun fabrics, and I was like, okay, I got it. It's gonna be just like I have it. And my mom and my sister would be like, what about this fabric? I'd be like, no, that's ugly, put it back. So they stopped helping because they were just like, you know what, just let her do her thing. And I kind of tried to, my favorite fabric was this one, hold on. This one here, because it has a bunch of bugs on it and I like bugs. And it was just really pretty and it had some blue in it. So I, from there, just tried to figure out like what kind of fabrics would kind of go with that aesthetic. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I do love him a lot, and he does look very cute next to it. Like it looks like they're made to be together. So I don't know. Miss Plath.
Approximately, if you could estimate how long it would take you from start to finish to make that, like, you know, so we can really actually understand the labor of love.
I would say each square took about 30 to 45 minutes. And there's 63 of them. And then the outer border probably took me half an hour. And then what took me a lot of time was hand sewing the fleece, which took me, as I said, like 3 to 5 hours. And then just a lot of measuring and cutting. I'd say I think it was somewhere at 70 hours, I think. I think the average quilt takes 80 hours. So, yeah. Susan? Yeah. I don't think I could do that. I was really proud of it, and I thought that if I tried to do something like that, it would ruin it, and I could send it to somebody to do it, but I kind of wanted it to just be me that worked on it. So. I'm getting the red folder, so I'm going to get off the stage, and I'm going to welcome Grady up here.
Hello everybody, my name is Grady, and for my senior project I've been collecting cans and bottles and also picking up trash and turning the trash into sculptures. So I'm going to start off with some history on why I chose to do that. Okay. So I've been picking up bottles for over 5 years now. It's something I like to do in my free time. When I was about 10 years old, I saw someone walk down the road picking up bottles, and I thought, it's a great idea. At the time, I was too young to have a job. 5 cents a bottle, why not? So since then, I've gotten better, definitely. Still been picking up bottles, and I knew for my senior project, I'd want to do something with that, but I wouldn't really learn anything because I've already been doing it, so I thought, usually when I'm picking up the bottles, there's a lot of trash that I leave behind, so why don't I also pick up the trash and make something beautiful out of that? My original goals: collect at least 5,000 cans and bottles. Collect trash and turn it into art sculptures. So at the beginning, wasn't really sure what that was going to mean, if it was going to be good or bad, but... And then another goal was to use the bottle money for good. Now, on to the bottles. Over 9 months, From June 1st to February 28th, I collected 5,166 bottles, which I was pretty happy about. Just barely made my goal, and that turns into $262.35. So once I took the money out in February, I really had no idea what I was going to do with it. I thought about putting it into a random charity or maybe handing it to someone on the street, but I knew I wanted to know where the money went. And at school and stuff, I heard people talk about Maine Needs. It's a nonprofit in Portland that gives Mainers things they need. And I saw these 2 kits on their website. First one, the art therapy kit. I chose to do that because I'm making art. Everyone else should too. And next one, the cleaning and toiletry kit. I chose to make that one because that's stuff that people really need, like cleaning supplies, toothbrush, toothpaste, stuff like that. So here's some photos of the kits. This is the first one, the cleaning and toiletry kit. I made 3 of those. Probably about $60. They were pretty fun to make too. And then here's the art therapy kit. I made 6 of those. I made for kids around 5 years old, because there's coloring books, crayons, markers, all that fun stuff. Now, before I flip to the next slide, now we're getting into the art sculptures. It didn't start out great, so this might be, you'll see. First one I made, thank you. This is supposed to be a tree, if you couldn't tell. So I was walking down the road and I saw a green lawn chair, and I was like, that looks like a tree. I'll make a tree out of that. It was made out of straw, so I cut all the green parts off, found an old can of paint and some plastic. So the reason it's kind of ugly is because I wasn't sure if I should use paint and stuff or if I should just use trash that I found. I also thought about using chewed gum, but that's kind of gross. So I did use glue. So there's that, the first one I made. Now we're getting better. This is a face. Still no paint, but I did use glue. Yeah, so after I made these two, I was feeling pretty defeated. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with the rest of the sculptures. I thought about dropping it and sticking with the bottles, but I knew I had to keep going. So not many of you might not know, there's a bit of a skunk problem at the high school with the compost bin. Skunks are getting in, eating the compost, on their way home they're spraying poor Winnie and Willa. So this is what the compost bin looks like right now. You can see Winnie and Willa right there, probably 10 feet. So skunks are it's pretty easy for them to go and spray Winnie and Willa. This is what it looks like up close. Lots of food and trash in there. You can see it's just 4 stakes in the ground with some fence around, lots of holes, so all the critters are getting in. So I knew something had to change with this. Something had to be done. And throughout making my sculptures, I had these tires. I tried to do a lot of things with them. There's a lot of metal in tires, which I found out. I tried cutting them, couldn't do it. So I thought, ooh, I could make a compost bin out of these tires and I wouldn't have to cut anything. That would be pretty easy. So that's what I did. I stacked them on top of each other, thought of a plan, and I thought, what would really get these skunks out of here? So I made a giant skunk out of the compost bin. So this is building it. This is it. While it was no paint or anything yet, I put a pallet underneath for ventilation. And you can see there's the tail and the stripe on the back. And here's the final product of the skunk compost bin. Okay. Thank you. So, as you can see, skunks have tails. This tail is made out of tarp. So say the skunks are eating, big gust of wind comes, tarps are flapping in the air, scaring them off. And the reason he's smiling is because we don't want to scare the kids away. We want a nice skunk, but we still want him to scare away the other small skunks. And as I was looking at it, it was looking pretty boring. So I wrote skunk and put an X over it just in case they think they can come by. That'll really tell them, get out of here. Now, on to challenges I had with the project. First one, collecting balls and trash in the winter. As you know, streets are icy, lots of snow, so I couldn't really pick up bottles and trash in the winter. So I tried to do a lot of bottles over the summer, and I collected trash in the fall to later make sculptures in the winter. Staying motivated throughout the year. You saw those first 2 sculptures. After I made those, I thought about giving up, but I stuck with it. And then getting inspiration. There was lots of times where I just threw a bunch of trash on the floor, stared at it for 20 minutes, and did nothing. But on to the conclusion. Trash sculptures are harder than you think. Next time you have a couple minutes on your hands, maybe go pick up some trash, make something pretty. Save your bottles, it's the least you can do. It may not seem like it adds up, but it does. After 9 months, you'll have $250 if you really work hard. And then my plans for the future with picking up bottles and trash sculptures, I don't think I'll make any more trash sculptures, even though it was fun. And I think I'll always pick up bottles. It's something I like doing. Great way to make some extra cash. Thank you to my mentors, Ms. Wells, for really keeping me on track when I wasn't making them, and my out-of-school mentor, Keeling Mitchell, for giving me inspiration. And a special thank you to all litter bugs throwing their bottles and cans out the windows. Any questions? Thank you. Lola.
I don't think I've seen the skunk at school.
Oh yeah, I forgot to say, it's in my car. I'm setting it up tomorrow. I didn't have enough time today. Conrad.
How did your family feel about all this trash at your house?
Ooh, it was pretty rough. My dad started throwing sculptures away at one point because taking up too much space in the shed. Yep.
That's sort of my question. What did you do with the trash sculptures?
They're sitting in a shed right now. I gotta find somewhere to put them. Maybe I'll sell them. If anyone wants to buy them, let me know. Nora.
Did you clean the trash before you did
That's a good question. Some of it I tried, and some of it I even had to throw away because it was so bad, but There might be some smelly sculpture around my house. I don't know. Mr. Shahan.
So when I moved here, it's like in the spring, it seemed to be like your wheelhouse on the yard, right?
Oh, for sure.
All that when it snowed. Were you really eager for the first melt this spring?
Yeah, I've been waiting. I went out first day, got a lot of bottles. Anything else? Okay, next up is Isla.
Good evening, everyone. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Isla Barmby, and for my senior project, I chose to make an effort to help improve the life-saving skills and tools here at Maine Waldorf. So when I first started brainstorming for my project, I knew that I wanted to do something relating to emergency medicine, as I'm interested in going into the medical field, and emergency medicine is a passion of mine. So as I was saying, I initially hoped to do something relating to that. My initial idea was to do an EMT certification with potentially a lifeguard certification as well, but due to COVID and other logistical issues, that wasn't possible, but I was able to do a wilderness first responder certification, which I was super happy to do. And while I had hoped to use those new skills to help co-supervise a 5th grade camping trip here at school, due to COVID that was canceled, so I was bummed that I wasn't able to use those skills, but I look forward to opportunities to do that in the future. And as you can tell, while COVID was my largest obstacle, I am still very happy with what I was able to accomplish through this project, and I am very excited to share it with you all. So as you can see, my project is broken down into 3 individual parts. Part 1 being my wilderness first responder certification, which I'll talk more about in a moment. Part 2 being the application for the Stephen and Tabitha King Foundation grant, which I will also talk about in a few more minutes. And then my final part of my project was assisting with a hybrid CPR and first aid course here at school. So for my wilderness first responder certification, this course was hosted in Peacham, Vermont, which was a bit of a hike, but my mom was very kind and was willing to rent an Airbnb with me in a nearby town for 8 days, which was super awesome. And so this course lasted 8 days in total, and our days were from 9 to 5 or 6 p.m. at night. We did plenty of lecture-based work with demonstrations and plenty of time for hands-on skills, and plenty of practice scenarios and things like that. You can see I have plenty of images. There will be more in a moment. You can browse through those as well. I do want to say this course was hosted outside, which was super fun, rain or shine, which made for some adventures. But you can see we had an outdoor classroom set up over here in the first image. And then here is actually an image of the classroom from the student's perspective. That was a slide from our lecture on compensatory shock and increasing intracranial pressure. And this is our instructor. You can't really tell on the screen, but she is drawing the different kinds of breathing patterns that are associated with this kind of emergency. And then I also want to highlight this image. This is one of our demonstrations of how to create an S-hitch, which is used in creating a traction splint for a femoral fracture. For those of you who don't know, femoral fractures are a big emergency because there's lots of potential for internal bleeding. And these kinds of splints are used the basic idea is that by pulling on opposite ends of the bone, you can reset the fracture and hopefully restore circulation to the lower extremity. And this is the kind of the kind of hitch that you use to secure the ankle so that you can pull adequate traction to restore blood flow. And then in my next slide, I have a few more images that I want to highlight. Over here in the upper left-hand corner, that is a splint that I created with different things that I had in my backpack. For the rigid device used to stabilize the fracture, I used a compact umbrella that I had in my bag, and you can see plenty of fleeces and things like that that I used to pad the arm to keep it comfortable. You can also see little shoelaces and things like that I used to bind the splint tight so that it could do its job, which would be splinting the fracture. And you can see my partner from the course, Claire, over here wearing her sling and swath, which are 2 things that are used to support the splinted arm so that she could theoretically walk out of the woods comfortably so that she could get adequate medical treatment. And then here are a few images of my notes. I thought I would include those, but I do also want to talk about these two images here. So in these two images, you can see they are both of me in a hypo wrap. These kinds of wraps are used to preserve patients' heat when you come across a patient in the outdoors, because heat is essential in preventing shock and in keeping a patient stable as well. And these kinds of wraps are used to do that. You can see they're a little bit like a burrito. You have the outermost layer being a waterproof and weatherproof tarp, which keeps the patient protected from the elements and provides the most protection. You can also see like sleeping bags and blankets and things like that, which are used to keep the patient warm. Both of these days, I was nice and toasty, which is saying a lot because on the image on the right, I was pretending to be a patient with a broken ankle, and it started to pour in the woods, and it was quite cold. But I was nice and toasty, which meant that it was doing its job. The last image that I want to highlight from this experience was this one on the bottom right. This was from our conversation about what needs to be in a first aid kit, which for me, those of you who know me know that I really like to be prepared for the worst. And this was a super meaningful aspect for me because you got to learn what you needed to have, the bare essentials because when you're out in the woods, you don't want to have a ton of things because every weight is a lot. And learning what I needed to have to treat a patient in the wilderness was super helpful to me. And other things that I learned from this experience, those of you who know me well do know that I do carry a first aid kit wherever I go. So having the knowledge of what should be in there was super helpful, ranging from tarps, trauma shears, to diluted iodine and things like that. Additionally, I gained a lot of things from this course. I'm really grateful for the knowledge that I now feel more prepared to go into the woods or on another adventure by myself or with friends. And I am now more eligible to work for Apogee Adventures or a program like Overland, or even if I ever wanted to help lead a college orientation trip, these are the kinds of certifications that are used or that are required. Additionally, I am getting my wilderness EMT certification this summer, and having the certification makes that process half as long and a little bit cheaper, which is also super awesome. And then part 2 of my project was applying for the Stephen and Tabitha King Foundation grant. Yes, that is Stephen King, the horror author. And the reason that Nurse Kendra and I wanted to apply for this grant was so that we could replace 2 of the AEDs that we do have on campus. For those of you who don't know what an AED is, it's an automatic external defibrillator device, which is used when someone's having a cardiac emergency. So as I said, we do have 2 here at the school, but they are both old and very expired. So Kendra and I are hoping to get both 2 to replace the ones we do have and 1 for the high school. And if you think about it, the time spent from a high schooler running to and from a location of an AED at our school is valuable time that someone having a cardiac emergency might not have. So having 1 in our high school would be very beneficial. Additionally, with the grant, we are hoping to purchase our own set of instructor equipment for CPR and CPR and first aid courses. Because as it is right now, if we want to have a course, Kendra has to email multiple people to see if she can borrow the kind of equipment that you need to teach a course. So having our own set would make her life super easier, and it would make these kinds of courses more accessible to the Waldorf community. And then I wanted to highlight just a smaller screenshot of this grant. You can see over here, we are requesting $8,559, which is a lot. But AEDs are not cheap, and purchasing 3 especially is a scary number. But this is a foundation that schools in the past have used to help get their AED costs covered. So we both have our fingers crossed in the fact that that will work. We will be hearing back in a few months, but fingers crossed that that works. And then the final part of my project was co-facilitating and helping with a CPR and first aid class that we had here at Maine Coast Waldorf. This course was a hybrid course through the American Red Cross. It was, as I said, hybrid, so these students completed 2 to 3 hours of online coursework before a 1.5 hour in-person skills check that we had last Monday. And here you can actually see 2 of my peers practicing chest compressions on infants. Kudos to those guys for letting me put pictures of them in my slideshow. But this course, I had to help with advertising, and I was super happy that all of our spots were filled. We had people from all branches. We had high schoolers, middle schoolers, and a faculty member, which was super exciting. And then in the middle, you can also see a picture of me demonstrating how to use an EpiPen. Both Kendra and I thought that this would be a good thing to add on to the skills check because of the amount of allergies that we have here on campus. So having a demonstration of how to use an EpiPen was something that we both thought would be beneficial. And then I just want to close by giving many thank yous to everyone who helped make this project possible. A huge shout out to Kendra, who is sitting back there. She was both a support person in creating this project and also making this presentation possible and all of the work that went behind it. So I really appreciate all that she did. Additionally, I want to thank my outside of school mentor, who was Sarah Coburn, for all of her time. I also want to thank Mr. Lee for all of his help in navigating the implications that COVID had on my initial plans. And then I also want to thank all of the individuals who decided to get CPR and first aid certified, because not only did that make that part of my project possible, you are also contributing to a safer environment, which I know I appreciate, and I'm sure the rest of you do too. And then finally, I want to give a shout out to my parents for all of their love and support, and to my mom for spending a week in rural Vermont with me in August. So thank you all, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Nate.
So out of all the work you've done in this project, what is a highlight or a key memory that has stuck with you and you think that will stick with you in the future of your life?
I have to say, lying in the woods waiting for my partner to come and rescue me in the pouring rain is definitely a memory I will keep with me. I have a video on my phone of the rain when it started to pour. It's like you can start to hear it and then it just all comes down. But being in character, I remained lying on the ground, twisted. But any other questions? Mr. Barham?
I apologize for this question, but when you said that the AECs are expired, I'm really curious about that. Does that mean that they don't work? They don't do what they're supposed to do?
Not necessarily, but ideally they are a little bit old and haven't been serviced in many years. So this was something that Kendra and I are really hoping goes through so that we can have guaranteed working AEDs.
So until such time as they are in place, would we be better off finding you than
Maybe. Yeah. But hopefully by the end of the year we will have working AEDs. Mr. Shahan?
Is there anything in your first aid kit that you carry with you at all times that you're not going to be allowed to take into your college diploma next year?
No. Scissors? That's the most dangerous thing.
Isla, you obviously are interested in the medical field or some point, but right now, what interests you? What aspect?
Many things. To name a few, I am interested in emergency medicine. Anyone who knows me knows I love to watch anything medical TV, documentaries, and YouTube videos on surgeries and things like that. Surgery is something that is interesting to me, but additionally, all of the neuroscience behind it as well, not behind surgery, but in general. And cardiovascular things are also really interesting. So I cannot wait to move on and get started in that department. But thank you. Any other final questions?
Can I just suggest if the mannequin grant doesn't work out, that Grady making some stuff out?
That would work. I would support that. If there are no further questions, I would like to welcome up Conrad Anderson.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Conrad. For my senior project, I converted a Sprinter van. This has been a dream of mine since I was in about 6th grade, so it was awesome to finally see it come to life. I also now hold the record for the most amount of times having gone to Home Depot, Lowe's, and the hardware store in a 6-month period. So if you think you've beat me in that, let me know. So starting off, my goals for this project was to convert a van into a comfortably livable space. I say comfortably livable because I could have just left it as the metal box that it started off as, but I wanted to be able to live in it comfortably, have things like running water, electricity, a stove to cook on, and a refrigerator to keep food cool. Second thing was to learn or continue learning the skills necessary for the conversion. The learning part was the electrical and the plumbing. I had no experience whatsoever with that before, other than knowing how to plug something into the wall or replace batteries in a headlamp. I had no experience with that. Continue learning skills. I would say I was a fairly proficient woodworker, so that was kind of deepening those skills. And lastly, enjoy the process. I didn't really want, it's a senior project. I didn't want it to feel like an assignment or homework. I wanted to have fun while doing it. So, this is my van. You probably saw it outside. It is a 2007 Dodge Sprinter. There's a couple years where Mercedes and Dodge collaborated, so it's got a Mercedes engine, Dodge body, and everything else. 144-inch wheelbase, so it can fit in a parking spot, which was key. The vehicle, I purchased it from a guy in New Hampshire, has a little over 225,000 miles, so it's getting up there. The man I bought it from had already started converting it, as you can see here. I didn't really like what he was doing. He was going pretty cheap route, and so I begun with tearing it out, as you'll see in the next slide. A big part of the project was getting inspected, and I didn't really want to put much into it until it was inspected, just because if it didn't get inspected, I didn't want to have to sell it, putting all this money into it. So once it was inspected, the ball was rolling for the conversion. Here we have removing the previous conversion. Here's a big pile of all the stuff that I was ripping out. Here you can see Leo ripping out some of the floorboards. Insulating. Once we had that bare metal box, I could begin insulating. This basically is broken down into 4 steps. We got foam board, spray foam, batting, and Reflectix. Foam board is these pink boards. It comes in a 4x8 sheet, and this, you have to cut it. I had to cut it to size to exactly these boxes, which was a pretty tedious process. If you don't fit it right, you have to fill it in with this spray foam, which is this yellow stuff. Then in here, you can see this lighter pink stuff is batting. We can see Gus modeling, putting some in the cracks. And this is places that spray foam or foam board don't really want or can fit into. Last step, Reflectix. This goes on the bare metal surfaces to create a thermal barrier between the metal and the wood I would eventually put in. After I insulated, the floor was a big problem. It was very rusty, a couple holes that were rusted through. So I went to the town with the steel wool and some sandpaper, got all that rust away, and sealed it with some Rust-Oleum spray paint. After that, I took, I think it's 1/8-inch foam board and filled the corrugations of the floor with that. And then this foam board, as you can see here and here, was placed on top of it, cut to size around the wheel wells here and the door. That was placed on top, plywood on top of that, also cut to fit, and then vinyl was the last step for the floor, which turned out quite nicely, I thought. The bed. This step was a new learning for me. Cross nuts, never something I had no experience with. They're pre-drilled holes in vans and a lot of cars that these cross nuts go into. You have to get the right diameter. They go into the hole. This tool, you basically pull it apart. It squishes the cross nut in there, creating an anchor for the bolts, which held up my frame to my bed. And then I eventually put a platform on and then a mattress, which you'll see later in the presentation. Electrical, again, like I talked about earlier, I have no experience with it whatsoever. So it was a bunch of new things that I had to learn. This diagram right here is from a website I used throughout the conversion. It's faroutride.com. They have converted a van. They're on their second van, and they just have a ton of really, really good resources. So we can see starting off up here, I've got two 100-watt solar panels on the roof of the van. They come through the roof and go down underneath the bed and eventually to my charge controller right here through a series of circuit breakers and fuses, an on-off switch, another fuse into my batteries. I've got two 12-volt batteries. They will last me a while if it's cloudy for a long stretch. And then this guy right here is a monitor, so I can pull out my phone. I have an app on my phone that can tell me how many days, hours I have left on the batteries, how much charge I'm getting, anything like that. In here is my fuse box, as you can see right here. It goes to my utilities. I've got puck lights, as you can see right here, 8 of those guys, ceiling fan for ventilation, my fridge is 12 volt, and my oven lights also run off the batteries. And then this guy is an inverter, so if you want to plug in a computer or just like a normal outlet, it converts it from 12 volt DC into AC. Shore power is for if I want to plug into like an RV. If I'm at like a campground, there's like those RV plugins. If it's a cloudy day, I can plug in, give my battery some more juice. Kitchen was a fairly familiar process to me. I had a couple goals in mind. The first being I wanted to have as much counter space as possible. This butcher block came with the van from the previous conversion, so that was my main countertop. My stove and oven is right here. It's a little oven under here and some stove tops right here. My fridge, it's on a drawer, and then I want to maximize storage, which you can see. It's not finished yet, but I've got a bunch of drawers here and here, and then eventually under here. Propane is also under here. That's what my stove runs off of. My water system, I have a 25-gallon freshwater tank, and it is routed up here, and then it pops out right here into my foot pump, which if you tap it enough times, water will come up out of this fancy faucet that I made out of some copper pipe, and then down into my sink, into my gray water tank, which is down here. Cabinets and storage. The van is a small space, especially to live in, so I wanted to maximize it for storage. This is right above my kitchen. You can see the end of the butcher block. This is my kitchen storage. This will probably house things like food or cups. And then eventually right here, I'm looking to have some shelves for clothes. Garage. This is my favorite part of the van. This is an earlier picture, but it still has most of the things. The bike drawer. This is one of my favorite parts. It's got my 2 bikes on 2 400-pound drawer slides, so it's not going anywhere anytime soon. I've got some storage right here, and then there will be bins that I'm going to put in here. The electrical, as you saw before, is right here, water tanks here, and I plan to eventually put a box in here for my skis and fishing rods and longer things. And then before I do the final reveal, I have a couple big thank yous. Patrick Casper is my out-of-school mentor. He's converted a van himself. Was always there to help me out with any questions I had. Mr. O'Brien for keeping me on track. Dan Pilch, a neighbor, helping me out with the electrical. Mr. Lee, helping me out with the mechanical. Pete Price donated the batteries as well as knowledge throughout the conversion. Gus and Leo, as we can see, Leo is modeling, sweeping off the top of the van. They were always there to help me run to Lowe's or hold something. And then my parents, my dad helped me with the cabinets. My mom, always there for like a second opinion, second eye, super helpful. Last but not least, anybody who's not on this list who helped along the way, much appreciated. And the final reveal. This is the final product. I put final in quotation marks. This is my version 1. I'm more than sure there will be many things that I add along the way. As you can see, it's pretty unfinished right here. I'm planning to put some cabinets in there, or the bedroom shelves as well. I'm sure other things along the way. This is my Instagram. I have an Instagram account for the van. If you want to see the conversion beyond this, give it a follow. I try to keep it up to date. And I do have the van outside if you want to check it out after the presentation. So thank you. Yeah, Lola.
Are you going to take the van with you during internships?
Yes, I am on Friday driving it out to Denver for my internship. So yes, Nate Barmby.
What was the hardest challenge converting the van?
Yeah, like I said before, the inspection was a major thing just because it took a while for the van to get inspected, multiple mechanics, and so I didn't really want to put much money into it before I was inspected, and so that kind of, it was drawn out a while. Mr. Grout.
Of course, congratulations, you're going to travel in style. I'm not going to ask you about the overall cost, but as a ballpark, did you say that you were able to meet your budget more or less, or did it go out of control?
Yeah, as some of you might know, wood prices right now are crazy expensive, so that was a big one. I spent much more on wood than I would have liked to, but also just like screws along the way, random things did add up quite quickly. Wes.
So you said you have a tank and there's a very large tank. Do you have, or do you plan on having any kind of like recycling filtration system, or is it just like draining things like a very large system?
Probably not. That would probably be pretty expensive. And it's not, there's quite a few places that you can just go and fill up the tank. So it's not a big, huge worry. Faith.
I didn't know how you would combat either really hot summer days or really cold winter days.
Yeah, this was a huge part of it. Working in the van, in the winter especially, was a pain. I'd be out there in like my heavy parka and like my gloves and hat, and I got a little Mr. Buddy heater, which did do the trick, but I hope down the road to get a diesel heater. But yeah, it was pretty hard, like trying to screw things in with numb hands or whatnot. Yeah. Yes.
So we know that you passed your vehicle inspection early on. Is there, when you're doing a project like this, with living space inside the vehicle, is there any equivalent to like a housing inspection to make sure that ventilation for your propane and things like all those things are safe?
Yeah, I don't know if there's like a actual certification or whatever or inspection that you need to pass, but I was pretty careful about that. Like I'm planning to install carbon monoxide alarms, all that good stuff. I do have the vent for that reason, just to let some fresh air in. Yeah. Susan. Yeah, yeah, like I'd said, the woodworking part was a part that I was more familiar with. The electrical stuff, that website, Far Out Ride, was a huge help, not only for the electrical, but a lot of things. They have like lists that you can just press a button and it all goes into your Amazon cart, which is pretty nice. So you don't have to like go through and find every piece. So that was a huge help. Yeah. Yes. I mean, this has kind of been the family joke, like how far am I going to make it out to Denver? But yeah, I hope to make it pretty far. I've had a couple mechanical issues that hopefully we've gotten those out of the way, but to be determined. Yes, Mr. Barham.
How far, I think you said, how far have you tested it already? What's the longest trip you've taken it so far?
From when we picked it up in New Hampshire. And there was no mechanical problem there, so. Yes. It's a diesel, so it's not bad. I'd say 25 to 30 maybe. Any other questions? Yes.
Are you a member of AAA?
I am. No, they've already been used quite a few times. Any other questions? Ms. Welsh.
I definitely want to go out and see it, but do you think you could recoup some of the costs by potentially having your parents rent it out as an Airbnb?
I already have my neighbors who are looking to rent it out as an Airbnb, so yes. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Right, so, we get one more beer round.
Congratulations to all the students that presented tonight, and the very best part of all this is at the same time, same place tomorrow, we're going to do the whole same thing again, so please come, tell more people that it's much more fun to be here than to watch it on the live stream, and these guys are happy to answer additional questions. There's things out in the hall, there's vans outside, so talk them up. Thank you all for coming, thank you all for presenting, and we'll see you tomorrow, and we'll do it all again.